They're twisting the text. They are trying to conceal its true meaning. We've heard, but their edits are shallow. The truth will out someday.
Ho, 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 peace of the Lord to all of you and Merry Christmas. Welcome to this very special show. Saying as we are still in the Christmas spirit, I thought I would actually do something a little bit fun and a little bit different to all of the other things that we normally have on the channel. So I hope that you enjoyed the recent Christmas special with Odon and John. And today, just to do something as well, quite unique, is this. I recently realized that there was a movie, an animated movie about the life of Muhammad. And I thought, okay, that's going to be interesting because they're not allowed to show Muhammad. And I wondered how would they actually pull it off. So I have watched this movie and now I'm going to just review it for you. It is a good movie. I will give my final score at the end. And when you watch it later, hopefully you will bear in mind some of the things that we're going to discuss here today. So the moment that I knew that there was this movie, I thought, okay, how are they going to talk about Muhammad's miracles? Like what miracles are they going to show and how they're going to put that on screen? Also, let's see how they treat the Quran, if they're going to talk about different people reciting it or whatnot. Also, the prosecution of the armies of Muhammad, of the first followers, how is that going to work? Also, what would be the split between that section of the movie that would be Muhammad and the followers in Mecca and then in Yathrib, and how they would do all of that? And also, how are they going to deal with all of the violence? So we're going to go through all of that pretty much frame by frame and see what happens, at least the important sections of the story. Now, before we start, do bear in mind that it is a cartoon, so you would expect them to take certain liberties, particularly when it comes to the violence. I mean, imagine this: if you watch a movie about the Gospels, then and it is for children, you could imagine that they would have 95% of it being copy paste from the Gospels, but then when it gets to like the Passion of the Christ, you would not have Mel Gibson's movie. You will just tune it down and just blur things out and make it a little bit more up to not too visual. So I would expect something like that to happen here, where things are going to be omitted and so on, and we will see. The surprise was that as going through the movie, so there are quite a few things in the movie that, yeah, I can see why those things are there and the hadiths where they got the information from. Then there are other things that are omitted, which exactly what I would expect, because again, it is meant to be for children, so you don't want to really scare them off. But then there were a couple of things that they simply just lied about it. They actually changed the story, and I was like, "Ooh, no, that's very naughty." Add whatever you want to add, even if you handpick hadiths to show a particular version of the prophet, but certainly do not lie about anything. So, and then we're going to also talk about the storytelling problem at the very end, like what you would get from this story and the way that it is told. And quite funnily enough, is that there are some sections in the movie that are haram. I have no idea how they got that approved, and but yeah, there are some things that shouldn't be in the movie because they really are not okay in Islam. So let's go and have a look. And just before I forget, because I will always do, make sure that you like and subscribe if you are new to the channel, because it helps us a lot. So thank you very much. And let's go and review this story. So first of all, we are actually told like who approved this movie, which is interesting. I don't know if before we watch the Da Vinci Code, it says it's approved by the Catholic Church or something of the sort, but fine, we get given here who actually approved it, which is fine. And the Supreme Islamic Shiite Council of Lebanon. That is interesting because as we go through the movie, there are some sections that certainly they have made it in a way that it is appealing also to the Shias. So we will see. And in here, a fun fact is, of course, it says that because of Islamic requirement, the personage of Muhammad will not be shown. That's exactly what you would expect. They just put it in first person view when Muhammad appears. Uh, Something that I was actually quite surprised to find out is that it is not only Muhammad, the Sahaba are also not shown. It's interesting. Needless to say, this is something that we will address on the channel, like seriously, in the new year, probably after quite a few months. But why they imposed this view that there couldn't be images of Muhammad or the Sahaba when it's not that clear in the text that that is what is meant to be. So certainly it arose because of the whole controversy around iconoclasm. But anyway, so it is not just Muhammad that doesn't appear. Also, other personalities will not be shown. So the story begins after the time of Muhammad, where this nice family, so it's this gentleman, his wife, and the little kid, they are going to the market and they find this man who is homeless and he's having a very bad time. So this very nice family tries to actually help him, and they help him all the way to the end. Oh, spoilers alert! And they help him. They're very, very nice people. And as the kid tries to understand what is going on, why they are not going to the market, almost the first words spoken in the movie is the father says, "Remember what the Quran teaches about charity. For those who give in charity, men and women, and loan to Allah a beautiful loan, it shall be increased manifold." Now, this is interesting because you would have heard Christian apologists, particularly making fun of this sentence. It certainly sounds like a complete money grab. Like, how can you actually lend anything to God? Certainly a money grab. But there is more to the story. When there are things like this, and we're going to see a couple in this movie, it's a matter of making something that would make people realize that there is a problem. They just throw it at you very quickly, and because they have just addressed it, then you are under the belief that okay, there is no problem with that. So they do that a couple of times, and we have seen something similar from Dawagandist many times. So it is a very, very useful technique. If there is a problem, throw it out there, so you are showing the world that actually it's not a problem when actually it is. Anyway, so they take this gentleman to their home and they start telling the story of how it all began. And it begins a little while earlier in Mecca. So we have the Kaaba right there, and then we have the idols depicted in this manner, all surrounding the Kaaba. By the way, the Kaaba is shown with many, many colors, which I didn't know it was the case. I missed those hadiths. And then while preparing for this, I checked, and yes, the Kaaba was adorned with many multiple colors, which I don't know how you feel about it, but I think it would be a good idea to bring that back. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Should the Kaaba just remain completely covered in black, or should they actually bring lots of very nice, colorful bits? What do you think? So this is how it begins. So they are there, and then there is a bit of a sequence where one of the main characters is just um, running around in Mecca. Things are happening, and then you can see the things that the movie is going to deny, or rather, what the movie is going to make a stance against. And one of them is this one. So it shows here some slaves being sold in Mecca, so at the very center of the city. And as the movie continues, it's going to be very clear that it is really condemned, except that eager viewers or people who know anything about Islam or history, they will know that that was certainly not the case. And here is where the whole whitewashing of history begins. The slavery not only is not condemned in Islam, huge parts of Sharia is about slavery. And in Saudi, slavery was abolished only in 1962, and that was because of the pressure from the West, particularly from the Brits and from the French, who said, "Nana, you shouldn't do this anymore." So it's interesting how they're trying to already change history in a movie like this that is, of course, addressed for children, where they will make this stance like, "Oh, you see, slavery bad." It's like, but Islam doesn't believe that. It never has. So I find it interesting, this misdirection. Now, then we are taken to this group of people who are basically the important traders and rulers of Mecca. The one here at the back is Abu Talib, and he is the only one pretty much that is on the side of Muhammad. And we will see that as we go on. So we have all of the other guys like Abu Lahab and the others who are overcharging the pilgrims, and they're super happy with that. We can charge them even more because they don't know. And Abu Talib is established very firmly as the one with good character, and he's not happy about that. It's like, we used to help people. What happened to us? Maybe that's just because Islam, they just see him very highly, or perhaps it's part of the Shia influence. Doesn't really matter. Abu Talib is actually portrayed as a very solid dude. So well done. Now, then something happens. This is the first time when, well, they show Muhammad, where Muhammad is doing something. So they show him, of course, first person, so him walking up to the mountain into a cave. And this is what the narrator says about the prophet. He was troubled by all the injustice of Mecca, slavery, the mistreatment of women, greed, gambling, the sacrifices of babies, and the reliance of idol gods made of wood and stone. You'll be glad to know that they made away with all of those idols. They only kept one stone, which is progress. But you will be concerned, just as I was, first about the whole slavery thing. They're condemning this. They're saying that they're really portraying Muhammad as being against the slavery. You go to Sharia, it says something very different. And Islam has been built on slavery. The mistreatment of women, well, there is this consonants that should never be put together. The first one is an F, then the second one is a G, and the third one is an M. So yeah, and then you have niqab and all of these other things. So I don't see how he would feel that there is injustice by the mistreatment of women when before Islam women were treated better. Greed, say no more. Gambling, this is interesting. Have met people who would swear their lives that in the very big casinos around the world, you will have these incredibly wealthy Muslims who spend, fortunes just gambling. So gambling and drinking, as you would know, is a bit of hit and miss depending on what Muslim you ask. And all right, so he's going up to the cave of Hira to pray. And then something very interesting happens. There is like a huge light that he looks at and that appears in front of him. And this happens. So suddenly he was surrounded by light. When he looked up, he saw the archangel Gabriel standing before him. He was speechless. Read, said the angel. I don't know how, was the reply. Gabriel repeated his command 3 times, and each time the reply was the same. And then Gabriel taught him, read in the name of your Lord, the Creator. He created men from a clot of blood. Read, and then it continues. Now, a couple of things to address. The same thing I said before, addressing something that is a problem like the loan to Allah. In here, the same. Read the Creator who created men from a clot of blood. That is obviously ridiculed by Christian apologists almost on a daily basis. But because they just throw it at you, that is a way of telling you, no, there is no problem, don't worry. If it was something to be embarrassed about, we wouldn't show it, is one of the techniques. Obviously, there are a number of problems here. They don't describe the angel choking him, which is a very important part of the hadith. Also, it is implying very heavily that the angel that he already knows who the angel is, which is not the case. as the story goes, Muhammad has no idea what has happened to him, and it is only when he gets to Waraka that the mystery is revealed, and Waraka says, "Oh, that must be Gabriel." But at this point, even though they are saying, "You see, it's Gabriel, it's Gabriel," there is no information at that point that this is Gabriel. That information happens later. All right, and then very big spoiler alert. This is just about the last time that Gabriel is mentioned. Okay? There will not be any instances in the movie of Muhammad receiving revelations, like, gradual revelations or anything of the sort. There will not be a mention of Dihiyya being Gabriel or Gabriel Dihiyya or anything of the sort. There will be nothing. There is this light appears to Muhammad at this point, and that's that. We can move on. Let's not think about it. You would think that they would make the prophet be receiving revelations every once in a while or doing things. None of that happens in the movie. Hmm? Very interesting that such an important character in the whole thing, and he's not there. Hmm? And then something even more interesting happens. So Muhammad then is very scared because of what has happened, and then he runs away from the cave of Hira, going to his home. And then this is described in this manner. Then Muhammad goes down the mountain. He doubted what he had seen, but on his way down the mountain, Gabriel appeared again and said, "Muhammad, you are the messenger of God, and I am Gabriel." He tried to turn away, but no matter where he looked, Gabriel was there, repeating his message. I wonder if this is a Shia reading, because this is not something that I have seen. After this, I've asked Grok, it's like, "Hey, can you tell me the hadith where this comes from?" Because all that the story that I have always read in the hadith is Muhammad goes from the cave of Hira home to Khadija and says, cover me," and then they will go to Waraka. That's all. That's when Waraka says that must have been Gabriel. But Gabriel appearing to Muhammad again and again, it doesn't happen when he's running down the mountain. It happens later, much later, when he is not receiving any revelations and he goes up the mountain because he wants to jump. And then is when Gabriel appears and says, "No, no, no, hey, you're the messenger of God. Okay? I'm Gabriel, you go, we got your back. Just don't jump." Hmm? To me, it looks like they have merged the two stories of Muhammad going to the cave of Hira and seeing the choking angel for the first time. And then much later, when he's trying to jump and Gabriel stops him, they have merged those two stories together, which of course you lose a lot of the story, because that's certainly not what happened. Gabriel did not introduce himself, and the reason that he keeps saying you are the messenger of God is when he wants to, you know what? Hmm? Interesting how they're twisting this little piece of the story. And then he goes to Khadija, and then Khadija goes to Waraka. And then Waraka says, "Your husband is a prophet of God. The people will accuse him of lying and many other evils, and he will be cast out." Interesting. This is the only time that Waraka appears in the story. Once again, when there is something omitted or changed, when it is critical to the story, we must think why. So in here, Waraka is the one that says that he's a prophet. In this story, he doesn't say that the angel must have been Gabriel, because the movie has already told us that before, even though that's not what happened. According to their sources, of course, none of it happened anyway. But another interesting thing is that Muhammad, according to their stories, he was receiving revelations. And then at one point, Waraka, who was writing the Old Testament in Hebrew or something like this, he was he was a scholar, basically. When Waraka dies, Muhammad stops receiving revelations for a while, which for anybody with any common sense, they will realize where the revelations were coming from. So in this case, they have to address Waraka. They put him in here. They say, yeah, he's a prophet, and then they move out. which is very interesting. By the way, think about this. Have you ever heard of a story in the Abrahamic faith where a prophet is accused of lying and who is denied by his own people? Hmm? Have you heard about such a story before? Deja vu? Anyone? Yes? No? Let me know in the comment section below if you've heard of any important Abrahamic characters who experience this. Anyway, so then the story tells us, as it is recorded in many hadiths, that for the following 3 years, the prophet preached in secret. And that's great. Mm, do you know of any other prophets in the Abrahamic faith who preached in secret for years? I don't know, maybe someone who said to the people, "Don't tell them that I have healed you. My time has not yet come." Maybe, I don't know. And just out of interest, I asked Grok, okay, can you actually confirm this? Because I wasn't, I read this hadith years ago, so I couldn't even remember. And it said yes. So first, he has a phase where he is preaching in secret. And then God is one tells him, okay, now you can go and preach in the open. That's very interesting. Are you not feeling like they had copied this from another well-known source? Hmm. Okay. And then sermon. So we get to the actual teachings. In here, they are like in a small house, as you can see, and the prophet is going to start teaching them stuff. That is the time when he's doing things in secret, of course. And it goes a little something like this. His revelations, this is the narrator speaking, his revelations, the Quran, offer the most beautiful words we had ever heard. Oh boy, somebody wants to tell that to Usama because I don't think that he's reading the book right about the beautiful words. So he taught us all the gods of Mecca are powerless. There is only one God, the God of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, and you have to surrender everything to him. So far, so good. There is no such thing as rich or slave in the eyes of God. All are equal, and the poor are not to be put down and despised. They are to be cared for. Now, I do have a huge problem with this final section, which I have said verbatim as it appears in the movie, because as we have established, as much as the movie tries to move away from the whole slavery thing, it's there in the Sharia. The history of Islam has been based on that, and still it is legal in some countries, like I think it's Mauritania and Libya. So, as much as they say this to sound righteous, this does not conform with the Islamic teachings at all. And you will hear people in the West saying, ha ha ha, we're going to do these things to you the moment that we have the numbers. So this is nonsense. And this thing about the poor are not to be put down and despised. There is a hadith which I couldn't find the reference. So if you find it, please leave a comment in the comment section below so that we can all find it. There is a hadith where Muhammad is speaking with a poor man, and the poor man is very happy to be speaking with the prophet of God. And then some noble people, some of the rich people from Quraysh, they're coming to visit Muhammad, and he's trying to get rid of the poor guy very quickly because he doesn't want to be seen speaking with poor when he's going to talk with very important people. Unfortunately, I couldn't get that hadith, but I am sure that you guys will be able to find the reference, so you can pin it. You can put it on the comment section below, and I will pin it later. But interesting how that doesn't actually match the what Islam actually became. But don't worry, there is going to be plenty of that going forward. And then they're showing the faces of all of the people in here, and it continues saying this. The Quran says, by the way, at that point, they still haven't written anything. In fact, this may be the last time that the Quran is even mentioned. You would be surprised how little Quran and how little Muhammad appear in this movie. it's insane. So the Quran says, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, the most honored of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Hmm. Women aren't possessions, they are God's creations and just as important as any man. Respect them. Well said. The earth is a gift from God. Treat it gently. You are its caretakers. And remember, you will all be judged according to your deeds. Many became Muslims that night. Now, again, I do have problems with this nonsense, these lies. This is not Islam in the slightest. In fact, you might actually be thinking that this sounds way too much Christianity. This is almost as if it was Jesus speaking with the first Christians or the first people who were um, uh, following him as the Messiah, and him saying these sort of words. These do not match the canon of Muhammad at all. Also, where it says women aren't possessions. Okay, according to Islam, they are. A man can divorce a woman by saying talak 3 times, and fully covered, always have to be with an escort for obvious reasons, and the famous F and then the G and then the M and all of these sort of things. This has nothing to do with Sharia, as much as they try to whitewash all of it and say, no, 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 Sharia is phenomenal. It's like, no, those things are not in there. Women are treated as possessions. Is just what it is. As much as they try to change it, it's not washing. We have the receipts. So I do have a problem with all of this. Respect them. Really? Should we say, what is it? Surah 474? Is it 474? The famous one? Yeah, it doesn't sound like very egalitarian or let's all be the same. Absolutely not in Islam. So and then we go back to our friend Abu Talib. As I said, he's my favorite character. He does a very good job. I love him to bits. So people start saying, hey, people are listening to Muhammad, this is not good. Okay, there's going to be some trouble. And he says, but why is there going to be trouble? All who listen to him are the poor and the weak. And immediately after says, oh, by the way, Abu Bakr has just joined, which, they don't like it very much. But once again, this sentence, those who follow Muhammad will be the poor and the weak. It's like, no, that's Jesus. Once again, the Christianity, when it was in the first probably 50 years of its spread, they called it the religion of the women and the slaves. It was preached to women, slaves, children, and it was about the poor and the weak for simple reasons. People who were doing okay in life, they would come and say, oh, worship God, give up lots of your possessions, and people would not do it because, if things are going well in your life, you're doing something right. Don't change it. But it is the poor and the weak who would actually take on to the teachings first, for the most part. So again, nothing to do with Muhammad. Then we have this guy. So obviously you can see here with the eyebrows and stuff. So he is going to be the bad guy of the movie. So he says, if Muhammad's preaching becomes popular and the gods are abolished, there will be no pilgrims. And if there are no pilgrims, there will be no more us. I'm so glad that they solved that problem. And to this day, they have lots of pilgrims. So you see, he was worrying about nothing. And then a shot of Muhammad just getting there to the crowd. So this is how they show in the movie when Muhammad is speaking to people, so always in the first person. And he just basically gets here and tells to everybody, abandon false gods. There is only one God. And trust me, bro, because otherwise everyone is in trouble. That is the second preaching of Muhammad. The first one, which was just Jesus. And this one telling to these people, there is only one God. That is how far the movie is going to go with the teachings of Muhammad. Here you have a very nice shot of the Kaaba, and I really hope they bring it back because isn't that beautiful compared to how it is now? Yeah. hmm Yeah. And Actually, Maca looks like Cinque Terre in Italy for some reason. Phenomenal. Anyway, so moving on, then people start to throw things at them, and the few followers that he has, they go, "Don't let them hurt the prophet." And it reminds me of this scene from The Chosen when people are trying to stone Jesus, and then the apostles just get in the way, and one of them gets hit in the head and things like that. It reminded me of that. That's just interesting. Anyway, so, and then the main character in the movie, for the most part, is Bilal. So you can see how they are going to play a lot with the the story of Bilal, except that, of course, they do change quite a lot. So what happened is the master of Bilal goes and asks him to deny Muhammad, and Bilal says, "No, no, no, I'm not denying his words." So then they start punishing him. Then a messenger comes from Abu Bakr and says to that master, "Okay, I'm buying this slave. How much do you want for it?" And he says, 10 gold coins, which is apparently a ridiculous amount of money. So the guy goes, gives him the 10 gold coins. The guy laughs, saying, "Ha ha ha, I would have accepted 3 coins for him." And the messenger of Abu Bakr says, "Well, he would have paid you 100." They really started trying to make the Sahaba look very good with that story. Mm. So, just a bit of an interesting thing. Then something quite cool happens. So here you can see a bow. Okay, so that bow is Hamza. It's very interesting here. I'll mark it for you. So because you cannot actually depict the companions in the movie, you will see later other examples where they will just do something silly like this. So in here we have Hamza appearing to talk to these people who are plotting against Mohammed, some for, some against. He enters the conversation, but all that you can see is the bow just moving up and down. It's super funny. It's hilarious. So good. Mm. So then is when these people in Mecca, they start to prosecuting the followers of Muhammad. So people accepting the prophet, they are asked to deny him, or they just get punished. Now, have you heard of that story before? Hmm? Have you heard that before? Think about it. In the Abrahamic faith, people asking the followers of a new prophet, deny him or will punish you. Hmm? And then that event actually leads to the first martyrs. Where did I hear this story before? Do you see how lots of the parallels, it looks like they took a lot of the stories from Jesus, which they knew very well, and then they added lots of other stories that were floating around, certainly from the likes of Umar and so on. But you can see that all of these things couldn't have happened. I mean, a moment later, they're going to go from Mecca to Yathrib, and within 20 years, they've conquered Jerusalem. So all of these things makes absolutely no sense. They are so incredibly weak and vulnerable. And according to that one preaching we saw, everything is just peace and treat everyone equally and hold hands together and sing Kumbaya. And in 20 years, they conquered Jerusalem and all of the lands in the middle by the sword. You see, there is a problem. This is just creating a story by using a blueprint that is known to them. So then another side quest happens. And as you can see, by the way, no Muhammad. Muhammad is pretty much nowhere to be seen, like literally and metaphorically. So these people are starting to be prosecuted because they have accepted Muhammad, and they are told to actually go to Abyssinia because over there is a Christian king who will welcome them, and he will protect them. So lots of people then they go to Abyssinia. When the bad guys find out that lots of the supporters of Muhammad have fled, this guy in here is paid to go to Abyssinia, give a lot of money to the king to see if he can give them the Muslims back, so they can be nasty to them. Interesting. The whole Abyssinia story is included in this movie. And then it happens. So they are in Abyssinia, and those refugees there who are running away from the guys prosecuting them from Mecca, this guy says, so we lived in ignorance. He, the messenger, called us to worship one God and to always tell the truth. I guess Taquilla had not been introduced yet. He asks us to love and care for our parents. It's like, dude, you were doing that before Muhammad. That was not news. To help our neighbors and give to the needy. Oof, I would have a lot to say about that. He taught us that our time in here is brief and that everything around us is a trust from God. Okay, those things, the final bit does seem to be very Islamic belief, so well done to the filmmakers. Then we have here the king of Abyssinia and the guy who is trying to get those guys. And then the king says, what they teach, Amir, this guy's Amir, is the gospel of Jesus. The other guy, the refugee, says, of Jesus, we say what our prophet said to us, that he is the servant of God, his messenger, his word, and his spirit, which he cast upon Mary, the Blessed Virgin. Then the king goes, what we believe and what you believe are like these two beams of light. And then he goes with the example of how they their beliefs are very, very compatible, which of course there aren't. But this is very interesting. I mean, after all of the work that you have seen showcased here on the channel, you know that this verse of in the Quran, Surah 457 or 71, I confused the two, 157 or 171, is when we have saying that Jesus is the word of God. And we have unpacked that one many times. The Quran was still Christian. This story is like put on top of everything, or rather, it is denied later. During the origins of Islam, or before the origins of Islam, when the book is written, when the Quran says that Jesus is the Word of God, is what Christians understand for the Word of God, as in not just a messenger, divine, and so on and so forth. The reason why I think these things are shoehorned even into the movie when they don't have to is once again what I discussed before. Sometimes you ignore something that you don't want people to notice, but sometimes when there is something that is very problematic, you just put it out there before they pull you up on it. And because you put it up, it it gives the impression that there is nothing to see here. Everything is good because otherwise we wouldn't bring this to your attention. And this is as well another clear example. The word of God and a spirit from God makes him divine immediately, as we have unpacked on the channel. But anyway, so these things happen in Abyssinia where people are protected by the good Christian king. So there you go. Lots of brownie points for him. Then what happens is the followers of Muhammad and Muhammad, they are outed from the city. They have no supplies and they are pretty much about to starve because they can't trade, they can't do anything. And we have this wonderful scene where Bilal is actually bringing food to the prophet, but the prophet is not accepting the food. And even he says, you can't keep giving your food to others. It's like, oh boy, they really try to make him look like a saint, which is extraordinary, but also what you would expect. But something as well to note is that even at this point, Bilal is still a slave. He's been a slave all this time. And in fact, he's never released. That is in the traditions. But it's a little bit of sleight of hand because they show that he was being really mistreated by the guy who owned him. Then Abu Bakr sends his messenger to give the 10 pieces of gold. And you would understand, particularly kids, if you're watching this, it's like, oh, you see, he rescued him. It's like, no, he did not rescue him. He bought him. He remains a slave. And in the traditions, even he says, there is a hadith of Oris Tabari, of Bilal saying something like, look, if you bought me for the sake of Allah, release me, or something of the sort. And I can't remember if it is Umar or Uthman at the time. They go, no. So he is actually bought and he remains as a slave. But the movie has this wonderful sleight of hand so that you think that he is just a free man when he very, very much is not. So, and then the one miracle. So far we have seen no miracles. So we have a scene where Abu Talib is sent to the other bad guys in Mecca, and he tells them, okay, look, I know that things are very heated with Muhammad, but this is what you do. I've been given a sign, and if that sign is true, then you will just be okay with him. You will just have a peace treaty, let him be. And if the sign doesn't come true, then fine, you go for him. I will not stop you. And the sign, which I had never heard of before, is that there was this sign on the door placed by the bad guys, basically saying nobody trade with Mohammed and his people. And Abu Talib says, if you go, you will see that the whole thing has been eaten by insects, except for the words in the name of Allah, which I don't know actually why they wrote that thing in there. They could have done a better job. But anyway, I was not aware of this. Apparently, I think this is not in the hadiths, but it is in the Sirah. You let me know in the comment section below. Is this supposed to be a very well known thing? But so far, this is the one miracle, the one sign, which is a piece of parchment eaten by insects. I kid you not. Okay, cool. So what happens next? Oh, so this is now, we are around the year 619, and this is when Abu Talib is already quite ill, actually, and then he dies, and also Khadija dies as well. They call that the year of the sorrow. So this is what is happening up to this point. Then they are already there again in Mecca, and then this gentleman comes for a visit from Yathrib. And as he does that, he says, oh, it used to be 12 of us who heard Prophet Muhammad, and we believed in him. And Bilal goes, you're only 12, nobody cares. And he says, no, 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 no. We are 12, but now there are hundreds. There are hundreds of people in Yathrib who believe in Muhammad. And then he says, Yathrib is full of war, and only Muhammad's message can bring peace. Okay, just take a moment to to really let this sink in. The guy from Yathrib goes to Medina to say that, basically to welcome Muhammad, because only his message can bring peace. This is Muhammad we're talking about. This is Islam we're talking about. Bringing peace? Are you getting the feeling that all of these parts of the story are just copied from Christianity? 12 believers, no more and no less, compared to 12 apostles. That then they become hundreds from those 12. And the message of the prophet brings peace. Are you seeing how this has nothing to do with Islam? Unless you mean peace by the sword, in that case, I'm all for it. As in, I'm all with you, if that's what you think. But yeah, it makes no sense in the canon of the story. So, and then obviously people want to unalive Muhammad before he escapes to Medina, and then they send assassins. And this is interesting. So they send the assassins, and they are all there just waiting. And the bad guy says, let's wait until the morning when he decides to leave. So instead of going into the house, they're waiting for him to come out in the morning. And then, and I'm not kidding, the movie makes all of the assassins fall asleep. If you want to know how to not write a story, this is how. You just couldn't have done a worse job. They send assassins and then they fall asleep. Really? Oh my goodness me. So now think about this. All the way up to this point, Muhammad has done nothing. All that he has done is say, worship one God, and then the other words, which were all about, oh yes, and women are not property, and things that do not match Islam in the slightest. Those are the only two things that have happened. Okay, there have been no miracles. There is nothing. Just people listening to him and saying, "Oh, yeah, yes, this is definitely the a prophet of God." There is no mention about a book. No one is writing anything down. This is insane. Mm? So anyway, this is the night when he goes to Jathrib. These guys at the end, they go into the house, and Ali is sleeping in the bed of Muhammad as he had been instructed. And you will be very pleased to know that they also don't show Ali. They make him appear, say, in first person view again, even though he was a child at the time and they could do it, but probably because of the whole Shia connection, they didn't even depict Ali. Just think about, think for a second as well, now that I'm saying this about Ali, how um, idolatrous that is. That you get in trouble if you actually create an image or a picture of or a cartoon, not only of Muhammad, which is bad enough, he's just a man, but of the companions. That is idolatrous like you would not believe. If and you know where this comes from. Like I mentioned before briefly, this comes because of the whole iconoclasm. The Christians, they have no problem creating images of Jesus, Mary, the apostles, things like that is like they're items of remembrance. It's not like crafting or creating a golden calf and worshiping the calf. This is just an item of remembrance. It divides Christianity even to this day. There will be lots that will say, no, no, no. It says don't make images of what is in heaven or on earth, and the fight will continue forever. But you can see that when all of these things were going on, particularly during the time of Abdul Malik, that's when they started to go full hardcore on absolutely no images of the Sahaba and the messenger, because the Christians, they were doing that about Jesus and the apostles. So they copied the story and then they gave it a 180. Has nothing to do with the original beliefs, but things that happened much later. But anyway, let's carry on. What happens next? Oh, I really love this. So then we see Mohammed actually walking into Jathrib, and everyone is so happy. Look at them. It's probably quite a few seconds of these people singing and dancing. But 1 second, what is going on? Where are they dancing and singing in a story about Muhammad? That's haram. This was one of the big ones. When I saw all these people just so happy singing, music is haram in Islam. Why did they have this in the movie? Hmm? I found it very odd. Hmm. Maybe it's before it was abrogated. But anyway, they shouldn't put it in the movie now. Hmm? Right? So, and then an interesting thing happens. So now he's in Jathrib and he's there with, you know, the people that believe in him and some of the companions and so on. And this is what is said. The Prophet taught us that all Muslims were brothers and sisters, one community standing shoulder to shoulder in prayer. Okay, so far, so good. That is absolutely true. In Islam, that's what they teach. They don't believe it because every Muslim uh, will tell you that every other Muslim is not a Muslim. Everybody, for every Muslim, everyone else is an apostate. Okay, doesn't really matter. Pick any Muslim from any country and ask them, what do you think about the guys from that country and from that country? They're going to say, those are not true Muslims, those are not true Muslims. There is no such thing as true Muslims according to any Muslim, which is very interesting. But this is meant to be the main thing, which of course they're putting this in the backdrop of this setting and some nice music, and you don't see the big problem, which is this is all Muslims were brothers and sisters. It's not saying all humans are brothers and sisters, it's saying all Muslims. We don't have a problem with it. But you know how this then developed into the Islamic, what is the correct word? Supremacy of anyone who is not a Muslim, they're the worst of creatures and so on. So that is actually according to Islamic belief, but it causes a lot of trouble. Then we continue. And he wrote a document that is the Declaration of Medina, what's it called? The document, whatever it was. And he wrote a document declaring all people in Yathrib would live as equals in peace, regardless of race or religion. Now, that is very the constitution of Medina. Now, that is very problematic for so many reasons, because that is not what Islam teaches. So, was that just abrogated? Or are people who came after Muhammad saying, nope, now we don't care about these things, it's all about being Muslim, and now race or religion are very, very important? Where was the verse of those who are not Muslim are the worst of creatures? Do you see how we have this big problem between the the document saying, yeah, we're all going to be equals, yeah, it's going to be so amazing, and then, but if you're not a Muslim, you are the worst of creatures and you're in trouble. See the problem? Hmm? And by the way, remember, he's supposed to be welcomed in Yathrib when he has done nothing. There have been no miracles. According to this movie, so far, all that it's been some insects eating a piece of parchment. If this story was of Jesus, at this point in the movie, we would be on the Last Supper after countless miracles. If this was the story of Moses, it would have already been after the plagues of Egypt, after crossing the Red Sea, and probably after the Mount Sinai. Okay? A lot of stuff. At this point, there has been nothing, like literally nothing. Just an angel appearing to Muhammad, and that is according to his word, because nobody gets to see it. And there is no book, the whole thing is a mess. Just think about the sheer insanity of the story. Then I just had to actually put this one here. They show this very nice scene where there is this lady putting her daughter to bed, and the little girl says, "Mama, are we the happiest people who ever lived?" And it made me chuckle, because this lady, this little girl, oh boy, is she in for a shock when she grows up. Probably she didn't hear about the hadith of Aisha saying, I've never seen a woman suffering more than a believing woman. And the whole thing about the skin turned green, and nobody will question a husband for, you know, um, being physical with his wife, right? So do you see like the propaganda in there? Like Aisha certainly said the opposite. Not only that, the hadiths are full of stories saying that hell is full of women. So they put those things in there, and we will talk about the impact of this propaganda once we actually get to the end. But let's actually continue, because we're going to get to the actual fight scenes of the movie. Are you looking forward to the war element? I am. So, and here we go. This is going to be what leads to the very first battle. So in here, the movie shows that they are taking the property of all of those who followed Muhammad, so the first Muslims. So the people in Mecca, they're just taking all of their possessions, and then they're going to go all the way to Damascus. They're going to follow the road to Damascus to sell all of that property. They make it sound like that first caravan, which then they're going to assault, is meant to have all of the property from those first Muslims. Now, that is a no. I am happy to stand corrected. Let me know in the comment section. But that's not what happened. I don't think so. So we have that caravan going, and then there is this fun bit where one of the guys says, "Oh, messenger of God, I know you hate violence, but..." So this is literally the conversation, okay? I know you hate violence, but... And then Muhammad says, we will go out and meet the caravan and take back what is ours. It's like, that's not yours. So I've never heard a hadith, or never have I heard a Dawagandist even saying, no, that belonged to the Muslims. Like, never. So I just asked Grog once again, maybe he's hallucinating. So you let me know. But what Grog was saying is like, no, this is wrong. The whole thing about the property being taken from Muslims, that had happened years prior. What is happening here is ordinary trade goods. So you are having the Meccan elite going to sell their goods. Muhammad is not Robin Hood or anything of the sort. He's going to attack caravan. He's not going to retrieve what is his. So I found it interesting. First, that thing of you hate violence, and it's like, oh, really? Really? Because I've read enough of Sirah and Hadith to know that that is not true. Mm. Anyway, so that is actually what happens, and that is actually what leads into the Battle of Badr. And it's interesting. So we have the previous scene where Muhammad says, basically, yeah, we're going to do this because it's our stuff anyway, which is not true. But there is something interesting that leads to the Battle of Badr, and that is the introduction to Taqiyya, to the actual lie. And if you want to get the full explanation, I recommend Yasir Qadi. He has videos talking, teaching his students about the Battle of Badr, and then he will explain how Muhammad goes and then tricks this guy into giving a lot of the information about their numbers and things like that. And then he runs away, and people go, that's a lie. And no, because remember, Muhammad cannot lie. So he didn't lie. He only deceived, twisted words, played with words. It's like that is a lie, okay? But this is the introduction to the word taquilla, which they didn't need to do that. All that they had to say is, look, they were about to fight in battle, his people against the other people, and he went and deceived the guy. They are fighting. That's fine. But instead of that, they still have to say, he didn't lie, it was taquilla, which is a lie, which is extraordinary. And of course, because of this problem, then is the situation that we have nowadays. And this is a word that people understand more and more and more about this word, which means, according to Sharia, Islam is in a perpetual state of war until they win in every single land. And in a state of war, you are more than allowed to apply taqiyya. And then you're having this problem where you have basically people just lying and saying, no, it's not lying. It's just that because Islam is saying that we can do this, it's like, yes, it's lying. It's just telling you that you shouldn't lie and then commanding you to lie and just calling it something else. But anyway, so Battle of Badr, which they are, if I remember correctly, 1,000 Meccans and 313 Muslims, something like that. Okay, cool. So then the fight happens, and in the beginning of the fight, there will be three from each side that they go and they fight. And as you can see, this guy is basically a nobody, nobody cares. But then these two, you only see the swords, is because they are the Sahaba. So they cannot show them. Remember, they cannot show them. Hmm? And I think this must be Ali because this is the sword of Ali, the famous sword that has this weird shape. Anyway, they go in there and they fight, and then they win against three guys. And then we have this image, and it's interesting because the depiction of the Battle of Badr and the reason why they win is because God sends 1,000 angels. Now, that story appears much later. And if anyone is interested, I could actually unpack it for you in the distant future because it's a lot of work to do that research, but it's just nonsense. There are 300 guys, but somehow they get 1,000 angels. And there is a whole backstory with that. But anyway, the way that the movie actually pictures this, they don't say that they are angels. They're just showing this is supposed to be the Muslim armies, but look how they show them. You see how not only all of them they have exactly the same faces because copy paste is great, but they have this glow, almost like they are divine or they are, filled with spirits or with, um, sorry, with angels or something like that, which is weird. They don't address it. They don't explain what happens. They just say, oh, they are fighting like lions. That's all. So this is the sort of things that if you are watching this movie when you are maybe 8 years old, you see this and you think, wow, the Muslims are so powerful. But if you are 20 years old, you think, oh, these people are just, they're having like angels helping them. Mm? So these things that they will leave it for you to interpret depending on your actual age. So that's the Battle of Badr. And then They are back in Yathrib, and then they are in the Battle of Uhud. And actually, this one, surprisingly enough, I don't really have much of a problem with this depiction. So they're going to fight once again the Meccans and the Muslims, and as that's going to happen, the these people here, they're on a hill, and they are told, do not move from here no matter what. If we are winning or if we are losing, stay in here, and that's that. You have to make sure that we are not attacked from the back. And they are fighting down below, and when the Muslims start to win, these people up here in the hill, they get a bit too happy, and they rush down the hill to attack the retreating Meccans. And then, of course, the Meccans take the opportunity to attack them from behind and so on. So I didn't hate the depiction of this specific battle, because that's something that does happen or did happen quite a lot. When an army would feint a retreat, for instance, in order to lure in the opposing army and then catch them out of position, it happened a lot, and lots of battles that were actually won and lost like that. If you've watched like a movie, like for example, to The Last Samurai, something like this happens when on the very final fight, spoilers alert, the the good guys, they're getting hammered, and then they feint a retreat, and everything is prepared for an ambush, and then they win basically against a larger force and so on. So many battles were lost by people breaking their ranks, thinking, okay, now we can pursue the enemies. Very often it was their leaders who said, okay, the enemy is routing, let's pursue and destroy them, and that's when you get destroyed. So positioning in warfare is very important, and in the whole story of what was happening, none of it happened. Just rest assured that it didn't happen, but it is the only thing that it is a little bit realistic. This thing happened all the time, and this is exactly what you would expect from a group of people who are not military trained, who are not elite soldiers. They are not going to stick to the ranks, and these things are going to happen. mm. But of course, none of it happened, because it's quite nonsense. But we will speak about that a little bit when we get to the end. But anyway, the Battle of Uhud, where they lose because these people are supposed to stay in this position, and they abandon the position, and then they lose. Those things is the only credible thing in this whole story. So, and then another part that I found quite disturbing. So we are having this session here when the Muslims find out that they are about to be attacked. They are in Yathrib, and they are very outnumbered. It's going to be like 700 of them against 10,000, which you should think were 10,000 people, where you would gather 10,000 people, certainly not from Mecca. So unless you got them from Yemen, there is no chance. But anyway, we're not discussing that today. And then they're having this discussion as to how can they even defend themselves. And then we have this gentleman here. He is Salman al-Farisi, who proposes to dig a trench. He is, or was meant to be, from Iran, from Isfahan, and he says, hey, in my lands, when we're being attacked with cavalry, we normally actually dig a trench. And that is a perfectly genuine tactic. Now, I think in late antiquity, these things were already basic, and you wouldn't need to be told to dig a trench. Every single time that there was any sort of fight, you will have a trench, you will have, well, a ditch, you will have a palisade. These things is just common warfare. If you cannot put a palisade, you cannot keep a cow out of the city. You're going to be overrun. So this is unnecessary. But the thing that actually annoyed me is that this guy, Salman, he's a companion. Not only he's a companion, he's one of the most important characters in the whole Islamic legend, because he's the one that actually confirms the prophethood of Muhammad. He's the one that had been sent from far and wide, from distant lands, to actually find him. Also, he is very crucial in some important stories, including here, the Battle of the Trench. So he was a very solid companion. He ends up being the governor of Iraq, I think. I can't remember if it was the whole Iraq. I think not as big as Al Hajjaj later, but he ends up having a lot of land, basically. And he is depicted as a very nice dude in both Sunni and Shia traditions. So Salman certainly does not get the credit he deserves, and hopefully next year I will be able to give him a little bit of credit because he is depicted like a solid guy. But anyway, I think it's haram that they showed him. They should not have done that. For some reason, we are seeing the Islamic supremacy where they don't care about Bilal because he's a slave. They don't care about Salman because he's Persian. So it's all about the Qurayshi, apparently. So anyway, so there is Salman al Farisi for you. And they dig a trench. Of course, in the movie, they just go overboard, and it's not really trench, is basically a canyon. And if you see the movie, it will make you laugh. It's impossible. Now, a trench normally is about what, 2-3 meters deep and 2-3 meters wide. If you see this, it's a canyon. It's just ridiculous. They need ladders to actually go up and down. It's quite something. And remember the date, it will be important in a bit, which is year 627. Not only we have many problems even with this depiction, if this had been the situation in Yathrib, the opposing army, they would have just sit it out. They would just actually lay siege to the city. Simple as that. Okay, they are not going anywhere. Nothing in, nothing out. But instead of that, they keep sending people to see if they can take it. Very, very silly. So anyway, it didn't happen. Then we have this nice image from inside the village where this old man is saying to his old lady, "Look, we have to protect the the entrance to the city, but if they come in and they are getting close to the houses, here you have a sack of rocks, throw this from the window." This is good strategy, as in where strategy goes, you would have everybody inside a city contributing, not like we see it in the movies. Women and children, they would do things in battle, even if it is just tending the wounded, uh, you know, giving arrows to the archers, those sort of things. They will be doing things, looking after the elderly. They will be contributing, so that's good. But the problem with this is that even to this point, they are trying to show how poor Muhammad, all that he said is be nice to one another, treat women well, and worship one God, and everybody is out to get him. And here they are depicted as the underdogs. It's going to be old people and it's going to be women when they are all so nice and peaceful, and these evil Meccans are coming to get them. And it's like, yeah, no, no, that's not what happened. Okay, they are putting all of this. All of this actually sounds very much like So Christian. There was one of these cartoons that I watched a while ago from, I think it's the Book of Acts, that you see a similar thing here, a similar theme where you have people hiding, you have women, children, old people just trying to survive because now they have been converted and everybody's against them. So they tried to do a similar theme here, but yeah, it's not really selling. So, and then an interesting thing happens. A sandstorm saves the day. So a sandstorm appears, and all of the bad guys are pretty much just blown away. The whole thing is, turned upside down, Deus ex machina. And fine, I do have many problems with this because it's a sandstorm. These are desert people. They are prepared to deal with sandstorms. They know when a sandstorm is coming and so on. So all that you can say is Deus ex machina, God just saves the day by sending a sandstorm. But what I found interesting is that one of the main events during this Battle of the Trench is supposed to be about Ali. Ali is basically they want to do one of these battles of the champions, like you see in the movies like Troy and stuff. And Ali volunteers and he jumps over the trench and fights one of the other guys, then, because of how much they fight, there will be a lot of dust. They cannot see what is going on. And then they just hear someone gets hit hard, everything stands still, and then they hear Allahu Akbar, and they know Ali has won. So that is a very momentous moment in this whole story, which the movie doesn't address at all. They removed Ali. Oh no. A great moment of fame just being removed and just saved by a sandstorm in the desert. So after that, we get this guy from Mecca who comes to Muhammad and says, look, let's have a peace treaty. And that's when the suspension of disbelief really has to kick in. Because up to this point, Muhammad has been always been the one in the defense. In the movie they have only shown him going for the caravan, and that was to take his own stuff. So he's the one being prosecuted all the time, and his forces. Why would the Meccans, who are the ones that are only going on the attack, be offering a peace treaty? And you realize that there is a huge problem here. They have shown Muhammad as just saying, get along, we're all brothers and sisters, everyone in Yathrib, oh, no race, no religion, everything is cool. But then you have the Meccans saying, okay, can we have a peace treaty for 10 years? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. You have just shown like this guy is like turn the other cheek sort of guy who is never going to fight back. So we have this huge problem. So why would they actually offer a peace treaty the way that he's been depicted in the movie? This is what happens when you just pick and choose what hadiths you want to actually show. Then a little while later, there is this guy who was from Makkah and he's trying to sneak into Yathrib. Then this guy finds him as well from Makkah and says, hey, where you going? And he says, look, how can we deny it any longer? Basically, that Muhammad is the prophet of God and so on. If you watch the movie, and I really want you to watch the movie, it's a lot of fun. At this point, I want you to just pause the movie for a minute and think, what has Muhammad done at this point, to this point? Nothing. There has been no signs. If you want to count 4 signs, insects eating piece of parchment and sandstorm in the desert, fine, you can have it. But think that this was the story of Jesus or of Moses. This would be after a ridiculous amount of actual miracles. This one, there is nothing. Muhammad has just said, let's get along. There is nothing. Nothing has happened. But to this guy here, he is like, oh, how can we deny it any longer? He has done nothing. He's literally done nothing. Only he's got people saying that they believe in him for no reason. This is not how you write a story. Oh my goodness me. It's so bad. And by the way, still no book. There has been no mention of book, virtually no Muhammad in the story, no Jibril. Oh my goodness me. Okay. So this guy is going to just pledge allegiance to Muhammad because he's such an obvious prophet with no miracles and no prophecies. But anyway, so and then that's the end of the story. A couple of things happen there when they just all get along, and then they go into Mecca, and there is joy. And then we go back to the guys from the beginning of the movie. So this guy here with the family and with the guy that they were helping, and the head of the family, this guy says, "I'll never forget the feeling of that day when they went into Mecca. It was filled with indescribable joy. How interesting that they don't talk about any head rolling. They don't talk about so many things that they should. That one, I would just give them a very solid pass because it's a cartoon, it's for children. So he is not going to say, we got in there and it could have been a bloodshed, but instead of that, the prophet was merciful and we only unalived 3 people. He's not going to say that, it's for children. So I'll give it a pass. But then look what he says next. Then he says to that guy, a few years later in Medina, after a short illness, the prophet died. He was 63. He always lived a simple and humble life, giving everything he had to the poor. Hmm. Yeah, he doesn't mention about the poisoning at Hyber. Okay. So this is now where you go from trying to make your character a good guy into just openly changing his character entirely. Now, this thing reminds me of a review from Moeller. If any of you knows that YouTuber, he's incredibly good. He does lots of reviews of movies, Marvel and Star Wars and stuff. Very, very good stuff. In one of the reviews, I think it is about uh, Captain Marvel, he said in the movie they show this lady who basically we don't know anything about her, but it is her friend who keeps saying, "Oh, you are very loyal and you are so hardworking and you're best friend," and she just keeps throwing words at her. But we haven't seen that in the movie at all. We've just seen this lady who is just basically with amnesia. We don't know anything about her, but we have to take the word from another character who simply says those things. That is very bad storytelling. In storytelling, you shouldn't just throw these lines to establish how great a character is. You need to show how great that character is. And this reminded me of that. So we get this guy saying in his own words what happened to Muhammad. And none of this thing is true. None of it is true. He's just telling this poor old man a lie. Hmm? A short illness? Really? He died because of a short illness? I think it was poisoned. According to the hadiths, it was poison. I don't know who wrote this script, but he's probably not aware that there are hadiths that say that anyone who makes up a lie about the prophet will take his place in hell. The people who wrote this thing, they are in trouble. Hmm? It's not a short illness. And then when it says he always lived a simple and humble life, giving everything he had to the poor, it's like absolutely not. He got a fifth of all of the war booty, and there were lots of campaigns. And by the time he was gone, he left huge amounts of land to his many, many, many wives. This guy was filthy rich. Humble life, giving everything he had to the poor. None of this is even remotely true. And remember, Bilal is still a slave at this point, but probably to Abu Bakr because he's the one who paid according to the movie. But this is just nonsense. Do you see the whitewashing in here? This is just bad. It's not what the hadiths say. They shouldn't make lies about their prophet. So now a few problems. Let's actually just go with the conclusion and with my rating, and then you can tell me if you agree or disagree. I hope that you actually watch the movie because it's good, but we will get to the final score in a minute. So things that the movie does not talk about at all. Hyper. Now, how can you understand anything at all about Islam and about Muhammad if you don't talk about Hyper? In fact, he cannot even go into Mecca and just walk up to the Kaaba unless you address Hyper. Hyper was the important event, the important city, and also the farthest place where he went in the Arabian Peninsula, according to the traditions. So, no mention of that for obvious reasons, right? It's for children, the movie is for children, so you need to take it easy a little tiny bit. It doesn't talk about the head rolling. In fact, everything is very peaceful. It's just let's sing Kumbaya together, and people just come after him for some reason. There is no wife being analyzed by a companion. There is no people being analyzed because they said nasty things about him. None of that is in here, but we will get to why that's a problem. There is no mention of Aisha, and this I don't understand. After all, she is the mother of the believers. I think there would have been a bit of a conflict when they were writing the script for this movie, I guess, because you have the Shias, and the Shias absolutely despise Aisha, and the Sunnis absolutely adore Aisha. In fact, in the Reliance of the Traveler says, if somebody insults Aisha, you know, to the slicing sound, you know what I mean? So maybe they just agreed, okay, let's just remove her. because otherwise, if we put Aisha in here, we are going to divide the room, and the Sunnis and Shias, we are not going to see eye to eye. But there will be another problem, because if they depict her, what age are they going to do? Because if they make her a grown-up woman, then you're going to have a problem. You're going to have people just going to this movie and saying, this is actually false, you are misleading the population. That was not true. So you have a problem. Obviously, it is a very big problem in the traditions, everything to do with Aisha. So I think they just decided, let's remove it. Also, there is no teachings of Muhammad. If you read the hadiths, all of the things that he says in the movie, you would notice that Muhammad appears only like what, 4 times? First, that he's saying things that sound very much like Jesus. Well, so that's the second time. The first time is going to the cave of Hira, and the whole story is mistold. Then, uh, what, a couple of other times when he said, "Oh, let's go for the caravan," it's just a couple of times. He appears less in his movie than he appears in his Quran. It's incredible, but there is no teachings about him. All of the things that we have in the hadiths, it has been sponged. You walk away with a very different feeling of who Muhammad was, and we are going to discuss that in a sec. Now, when they go into the Kaaba at the end of the movie, they just walk in there and everybody's happy. There is no distraction of the idols. All of that is completely and utterly ignored. Maybe because in one of the counts, they destroy everything, including all images, except the images of Mary and Jesus, which would cause a lot of confusion. They don't discuss about the many wives and concubines. This is about children, a children's story. But, how can you know about Muhammad without addressing that problem? Obviously, no mentions of the Banu Qurayza, even though every single Muslim knows that story full well. It is really important in the whole story of, or myth, I would say, of Muhammad. Also, notice how there is no Gabriel. We see at the very beginning this flash of lights in the cave of Hira, and boom, that's it. No more Gabriel. He says, "You're the prophet of God, and I'm Gabriel," and that's it. It's like, hang on a minute, but this is a very important part of the story. When is Gabriel appearing to Muhammad? What is he doing? How is that working? What is happening with the revelations? What is happening with the Quran? None of those things are addressed in the slightest. They just show that there is something called Gabriel as a light, and then they move on. It's like, but he was supposed to be appearing for 22 years, 23 years, giving revelations. Hmm? And of course, Ahrufs. I put Ahrufs here just to remind me of the topic of conversation, which is they don't talk about reciting the Quran. At no point the movie is talking about people reciting the Quran. It's only when you get to the end of the movie that you will see the call to prayer, and that's that. There is no mention of the Quran being taught, of people remembering it, memorizing it. There is no Muhammad showing to the people how that happens. So imagine arguably the most important thing in their whole tradition, and this movie could have added some of that. After all, it's for kids. Show how Muhammad is teaching the Quran to the rest of the population. Show Gabriel giving the revelations to Muhammad. Do it as a light. Do something. But instead of that, the whole thing is skipped. I can only imagine that it is because there are so many different stories about receiving the revelations. They contradict each other, and they show that there are many problems there, that they simply decided to ignore it. They just had to put the word Gabriel in one place, and then they had to run with it. Now we need to address a little bit about some of the problems and how this fits into propaganda and the wider context. But all right, so if you were to just watch this movie and you know nothing about Islam, or when it's actually fed to children, what you would get from this movie, from what is actually put on a screen, is that all fighting was done defensively. That's what you will get. That Muhammad is just telling people, yes, let's hold hands and sing kumbaya and get along, and then people are just trying to fight him and everything is offensive. This is what you would get from the movie. which we know it is an absolute not true characterization of what happened. The other thing that you would get, and this is very interesting, is that he only had one wife, and that is Khadija, because the movie tells the story up to the years of sorrow when Khadija passes away, and that's that. There is no mention of any other wife, which is quite something. Something that I found very interesting, actually, I'm going to put the next two at the same time, which is the movie doesn't address the moon split or the night journey. So, in fact, you don't get any miracles in the Quran. You get the ants or the insects eating a piece of parchment, and you get the sandstorm in the desert. Think about that. Why would they not talk about the moon split? If you have a movie about Jesus, you will have the death and resurrection. If you have a movie about Moses, you will have the splitting of the sea. These are the big, flashy things, right? So, how is it that when it comes to telling the story of Muhammad, they are not talking about the moon split? What I'm guessing is that this is is ridiculed now too hard. And if they put that in the movie, people will see that it makes absolutely no sense, and it would give room for apologists to jump in there and say, well, that didn't happen. The hadiths are very late. There are no witnesses, and it contradicts the Quran because the Quran says that people were asking Muhammad for miracles and he didn't have any. And then a verse miraculously becomes splitting of the moon. Anyway, that is not discussed outside of Islamic sources until hundreds of years after the time of Muhammad. So maybe that's what they realized, that if they put that in there, people are going to use that to go crazy and saying that it is nonsense. The same with the night journey. Think about it. Every single Muslim actually will know these two things full well: the moon split and Muhammad going to the heavens and meeting all of the prophets and so on. Those things are not addressed at no point. Like we've shown, it's first Gabriel in the cave of Hira, and then boom, that's it. No idea how he's getting the revelations, no idea about miracles, nothing is addressed. It's almost like he was told that he was a prophet, and then that's it. Hmm? Maybe as well because the night journey, Surah 17, verse 1, is very clearly not about Muhammad, most likely about Moses, because he's mentioned after, and we've done many shows about that. And also because nobody talks about the night journey outside of the traditions until hundreds of years after the time of Muhammad. So it is being ridiculed now more and more Muslims are starting to realize, okay, Surah 17, verse 1 is about Moses. So maybe that's why. But you would think that in a movie that they want to make Muhammad as the last prophet, as the movie is actually called, that they should address these two. You would think they are quite important. The night journey would be the equivalent of Moses and the burning bush. Can you imagine a story of Moses without the burning bush? No, me neither. Another thing that you would get from the movie is that slavery is abolished in Islam. It starts with demonizing those people in Mecca who practice slavery. Then you have the whole thing with Bilal being a top character. But this is not Islam at all. Like we've said, the slavery was abolished in Saudi Arabia in 1962 because of external pressures. Much of Sharia is still devoted to this. And you will know from many speakers, well, okay, I will not go there. You will get this from the movie, like, oh, slavery is bad. And it's like, yes, it's very bad, but this contradicts Islam. Islam doesn't believe this in the slightest. Hmm? Then also you would think that his death was due to illness as opposed to poison, which it is. The poison thing has been agreed and it's been canonized, and no one has argued against that until recent times. It is only in recent times when Muslims are starting to say, oh no, well, he was poisoned and then it took 3 years for him to die. So clearly it wasn't poison, except that the hadiths say Muhammad said, I still feel the poison. So it is certainly poison. But you see how they remove all of that as well from the story. I don't have a problem with not being depicted in any possible manner. because it is a cartoon, but you can see how you get a very different idea. And you cannot talk about Hyber and you cannot talk about those things. Also, you would get a feeling that Muhammad is an Arabian Jesus, because the only moment in the movie that he actually say speaks to the public is he's saying, treat women well. They are not your property. And it's like, oh boy, but this is not Islam. This is not Sharia. Guys, they almost try to make Muhammad in this movie as Jesus like as possible, which obviously removes Muhammad entirely. Also, there is no mention of angels. I mean, we had this Battle of Badr that anyone who has heard the story, they would have realized, okay, so the reason they win in Badr is because of angels, but it is not spelled out. So it really depends on the knowledge of the person you're speaking with, that you would sell it as, no, they were just fierce warriors because inspired by God or something, or no, they were actual angels. But there is no angels mentioned. And then we have this problem that Islam is all about equality. According to this movie, and when you watch it, you will see, all of a sudden is all about equality. Let's get along and be nice, which has nothing to do with Islam. Islam is not about equality. Sharia very clearly shows that. The Quran clearly shows that. But this is what you would get from the movie. You see every single time in the movie, you see characters like husbands and wives. You never see anybody with multiple wives. Isn't that a curious thing? Even the main character, the one that is telling the story, is a family, man, wife, and the kid. That's it. No multiple wives. Mm? And the wife is actually treated very well in the movie. It's like, but Islam doesn't, is not teaching that. It's very different. It really depends. If you're in a Christian country, they certainly will do all right, because otherwise bad things will happen. But go to other places. So you would get, if you just judge by the movie, you get a very different uh, idea of what Islam is, which makes it a huge propaganda thing. I don't really have much of a problem with the movie because it is for kids, and but there are other questions. We will address that in a sec. So, storytelling problems. Now, some of the problems that we see here is this. Why or how would you tell a story about Islam when you are going to address this for kids who are basically Christianized? Because I guess this movie is in English. So it has to be for people who have Christian values. So in order to tell the story about Muhammad, you have to remove all of the violence. But just like that, you really destroy the character. You are now not telling the story about the person. You're telling somebody else's story. You shouldn't do that. For example, would you tell a story about Napoleon and not include Waterloo? Of course not. If you have Napoleon, you have Waterloo. Okay? Would you tell a story about Henry VIII without having the whole thing with the wives? No, you wouldn't. Then don't go through the trouble. If you're going to tell the story of Moses and you're not going to put the splitting of the sea, don't create the movie about Moses, because you're creating someone completely different. You have to say everything from the beginning to the end. So when you're trying to tell the story about Muhammad, yet you take the violence out, is don't bother, don't create this story. You are not portraying the character as he's depicted in the stories. You are telling somebody else's stories, somebody else's story, and it's very uncool. Now, then it becomes nothing but shameless propaganda, and particularly for the West, because in the East, they would die laughing if they actually saw this. In the West, a wonderful story. You see, I always knew it was the religion of peace. I didn't know Muhammad was so persecuted by his own people. It's like, dude, that's just not what happened. Then we have to just break down like the difference between peaceful and not so peaceful Muslims. So Muslims who particularly live in the West and they have been Christianized, they watch this movie and they will be like, yes, you see, this is what I've been told. This is what I know. My Imam told me this. We are always discussing this. You see, Muhammad was the greatest man that has ever existed. Hmm? Now, if you show this to people who actually know the story, they would die laughing. They would not accept this. They would say, this is just absolute nonsense. You have not put anything about his teachings. You have not done anything to do with revelations, nothing to do with the Quran itself. And the character of the person is very, they have done a 180, which it should surprise no one because it's part of the propaganda that now have seen for a long time. Anyway, very briefly about the um, setting. So the Battle of the Trench, which was around 6 to 7, they are outnumbered. They are in Medina, and 10 years later or 12 years later, they end up conquering Jerusalem. This is something that it should be very clear that it could not happen that they go from being in that position in Yathrib in 6 to 7, and then before 640, they have conquered Jerusalem and every single land in between by the sword. These people have been portrayed in the movie as being all peaceful and um, being unjustly persecuted for believing in Muhammad. Yeah, and 12 years later, they have like a massive empire and they conquered the most heavily fortified city in the world, who the Christians, Jews, and Persians fight for. Really? And these people appear from the middle of nowhere in the Hijaz and they conquer. So we know that the whole story is nonsense. Hence why the whole thesis that the origins of all of this movement happened probably around Iraq, most likely in the lands of the Lahmeds, has a lot of power because that would make sense. In that land, they have warriors, but not in Mecca. You don't go from Mecca to Jerusalem in 10 years and conquer all of that. Absolutely not. But anyway, that's a different um, story. Also, you will get the feeling, hopefully, you will watch this movie later, and you will get the feeling that it's not depicting Islam, it's depicting Christianity. These people being prosecuted, they just believe in the last message, and then they're being demonized for it, and they're being prosecuted, and they're being hurt. It's like this is not telling the story of Islam. It's telling the story of Christianity, just placed in a different location. When people say that they believe in the prophet, they get punished. Everybody else is saying that he is lying. It's like, yeah, this is just they copied the story of Christianity because they really liked it, and that is what is acceptable for the masses. And the problem is that things like we see in this movie, we are used to them because this is the narrative that has been pushed to the masses for decades now. And it is interesting because we have two different movements. On the one hand, you have this movement, which is things like this movie. Muhammad was peaceful, everything was defensive, he gave rights to women, and all of those things. And that is what is being pushed to the masses, including Muslims. And then you have the other narrative, which is we just try to get numbers and then we conquer everyone and everyone is going to pay us the jizya and we're going to have our concubines and all of these things. So you're having these two stories being run in parallel. The problem is that most Muslims in the West, they believe this narrative. It's as if they were programmed with this movie. And they really believe that this is exactly what happened, that everything was peaceful, that Muhammad was all about giving rights to people, because look at the constitution of Medina and all of that nonsense. They haven't been told the truth. That's why when you see some Muslims, particularly Muslimas, saying, oh, when there is violence from Muslims, they don't follow Islam, they don't follow the Quran, they don't follow Sharia, they are doing something else. And it's like, no, I'm afraid that they are the ones following it. You are the one who thinks that Islam is this movie or something like this. So this is the propaganda that has been actually pushed. And lots of Muslims, they actually think that this is what happened. things like this. And it is absolutely not true. And then you have other Muslims who know this didn't happen, but they know they have to apply taqiyya. They have to say, yes, this is the version because, we don't have the numbers yet. So this narrative, we are all used to it. It's been pushed on all of us for a really long time. And the movie shows that very well. Remember, this movie was not meant to show what happened. It is, just like with everything else, another propaganda exercise where they don't even include Aisha, for goodness sake. Hmm? So, overall score, you might agree, you might disagree, but make sure you watch the movie and you tell me what your final score is. I rate this movie a very solid 6 out of 10, actually. I actually like the movie. All things being considered. Yes, I know it's all propaganda and so on, but considering that it is for children and it is an okay movie, it has this kind of Disney sort of look. It has a little bit of music here and there. They have used the music to great avail so that you don't see the gaps in the story not making sense and things contradicting Islam. So they have done all of these huge propaganda things. But movie as a movie on its own, it was all right. A for effort, as a complete fabrication, the whole thing from start to finish. But you know, it was enjoyable. I'd recommend anyone to actually give it a watch when you have nothing better to do. And bear in mind the things that we have discussed here so that you can actually see how Muhammad is basically not appearing in the movie at all. When he appears to say something, he's saying things that he wouldn't say, like, "Oh, let's go and assault this caravan because they have our goods." And he's like, "No, dude, that's just not happen." And even the previous guy saying, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, I know that you hate violence." He's like, "Really? This is not propaganda, right?" But if you watch it through through those new lenses, and you also consider that a lot of what they are showing here in this story is how they borrowed from Christianity in order to create their story. Hence why when you go to the Hadith, you have almost these two different stories. Some of the Prophet being full of light and things like that, and so wise, and then describing someone who sounds a lot like Umar, like a warlord, right? So you will have those two things. And it is because the story was not compiled from one human being. It was compiled from lots of people put together. And I think this movie does a very good job at actually distilling and showing the sections that would have been inspired, if not just borrowed or directly taken from Christianity. They try to make Muhammad sound as Jesus as much as they possibly can, incredibly virtuous, all about the singing Kumbaya, even though that's certainly not what the story was. So, and that is it. Let me know what you think. If you watch the movie, have you actually noticed other things? Did you like it? Did you not like it? I know that it is quite quite a lot to see a movie if you know the traditions, and then you see this movie will be quite annoying to see how they tried to basically remove all of the violence, all of the teachings, all of the revelations according to the traditions, and still make a movie of it. In the end, all that you are left with is basically a handful of characters saying, "We believe Muhammad is the true prophet," and the other people saying, "Stop saying that," and then they're fighting. That's the whole movie. Two groups of people fighting over the prophet who happens to not be in the movie at all because the couple of things that he says is not part of his teaching. But anyway, so that was my honest review, and this movie has given me a lot of things to think about, and hopefully next year I will be able to unpick or show a few things in more detail, particularly with our friend Salman, who I think he deserves a little bit more of credit than what he gets. So hopefully we'll do something to do with him. That's Salman Al Farisi. Um, and that's that. Anyway, so thank you for watching this very special um, episode. I'll probably not do more things like that for the time being, but if you want to see reviews on anything, just let me know. Any other ideas, let me know as well. And that's it. Thank you very much. I hope that you enjoyed the actual Christmas episode that we had just a little while ago with Odon and John, and that you've enjoyed this very different session. And we will go back to the normal stuff, unpacking the Quran, trying to figure out what it actually meant when it was first written and how the whole thing began. But anyway, for now, I will leave you here. Thank you very much for watching. God bless you all, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Indeed, we say Gitana to the night of decree. And what can make you know what is the night of decree? The night of decree is better than 1,000 months. The angels and the spirit descend there by permission of the Lord for every matter. Peace it is until the emergence of dawn. Nous l'avons certes fait descendre pendant la nuit d'Al-Qadr. Et qui te dira ce qu'est la nuit d'Al-Qadr? La nuit d'Al-Qadr est meilleure que 1000 mois. Durant celle-ci descendent les anges ainsi que l'esprit pour permission de leur Seigneur pour tout ordre. Et les paix et salut jusqu'à l'apparition de l'aube. Wahrlich, wir haben ihn hinabgesandt in der Nacht von Al-Qadr. Und was lehrt dich wissen ist, was die Nacht von Al-Qadr? Die Nacht von Al-Qadr ist besser als 1000 Monate. Es kommen die Engel und der Geist in ihr, mit der Erlaubnis ihres Herrn mit jeder Angelegenheit herab. Frieden ist sie bis zum Anbruch der Morgenröte. Es cierto que lo hicimos descender en la noche del decreto. Y cómo hacerte saber que es la noche del decreto. La noche del decreto es mejor que 1000 meses. En ella descienden los ángeles y el espíritu con las órdenes de tu Señor para cada asunto. Passa ella dura hasta il despuntar dell'alba. Invero l'abbiamo fatto scendere nella notte del destino. E chi potrà farti comprendere cos'è la notte del destino? La notte del destino è migliore di 1000 mesi. In essa discendono gli angeli e lo spirito con il permesso del loro Signore per fissa ogni decreto. E pace fino al levarsi dell'alba. Voorwaar, wij hebben hem neergezonden in de waardevolle nacht. En wat doet jullie weten wat de waardevolle nacht is? De waardevolle nacht is beter dan 1000 maanden. De engelen en de geest daalden in haar weer met de toestemming van het Heer voor elke beschikking. Het is vrede tot het reizen van de dageraad. Achem, anu horadenu belel hagoral. והאינדה היא לך מהו לילה גורל. לילה גורל טוב יותר מ1000 חודשים. המלאכים והרוח יורדים בו, בהית ריבונם לכל משימה. שלום הוא עד עלות השחר. אינדה אנזלנהו פי לילת אל-קדר. ומה אדרא כמה לילת אל-קדר. לילת אל-קדר חיר מן אלף שחר. تنزلون عليك والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر.